All right, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to Jewish Life Cycles, episode 19, the deathbed. Um, Obviously, this is a serious topic, and we'll try to give over information in a concrete way. Also, obviously, in a respectful manner. But we need to lay down some ground rules. Uh, Death is not the focus of Judaism. We've said that many, many times. In fact, I was just re-listening to last year's Parshat Emor class, uh, this week's Parsha, but last year, and I see that I brought down a very, very beautiful Rav Hirsch, who talks about one of the main differences between Judaism and other religions. That other religions sort of focus on death, and that's what the gods of other religions. That's what they quote unquote gods of other religions. That's what they want. That's how you appease the gods is with death and everything else. And death is supposed to be the furthest thing from us. This is why the Kohen Gadol, our priest, doesn't even go to funerals, because death is not what we're about. We're about life. We're about knowing how to live life properly. So very often, uh, as a rabbi and as somebody who conducts funerals, I get asked questions like what happens, what happens to the soul afterwards? Where is the neshama? So there are ideas that we have about these sorts of things, but nothing is really concrete, and nothing. It's all very metaphorical, and it's important to remember that the prophet tells us no eye has ever seen what really goes on in Olam Haba, in the next world, to come back and tell us what's going on. We have again, we have metaphors, we have ideas. The main thing to remember, one of the very, very important concepts in Jewish philosophy, is that this world is for doing. This world, as the Mishnah tells us, and is an aspaklaria. Sorry, is a not aspaklaria. This world is a foyer, a preparatory room for the world to come. This is the world for doing. This is the world where you can do mitzvot and other things. And the world to come is not a place where you can do mitzvot. You're done. Everything you've accomplished in this world. And when you're gone, and then you can't really accomplish anymore. You can receive your reward at that point. You can perhaps get even more reward, as we'll see with people saying Kaddish, etc. But really, your task is to live life in this world. And when we leave, we are leaving behind a body, but our soul is eternal. Our soul, we say, is a piece of Hashem. Mimal is a we say it's obviously Hashem has no pieces. He's not a physical being, but in a sort of metaphorical sense, our soul is always attached to Hashem. And so when we leave the world, we're still as alive as we ever were, in a sense, because our soul is what keeps us alive. Our body is gone. Our body stays here, but our souls are intact. And that's going to be one of the reasons, or one of the core ideas that we need to keep in mind when we go through some of the mitzvot and some of the halachot that we're going to see regarding death and burial and all these other things in the next few classes. We have our soul is immortal, and it's an amazing thing. And our reward is eternal. It's an amazing thing also. So let's get to the nitty gritty. So we talked about in the last class, we talked about the sick bed, right? You're visiting somebody, so let's say, God forbid, a relative who's sick, and it's time for them to pass, and you're visiting them, and then you find out, somebody tells you, they have just moments left. They have moments left. What are you supposed to do in that situation? So first of all, as mentioned last time, when there are moments left, when life is almost done, you are supposed to, the dying person should say a vidui. Well, we went over some of the steps of the vidui in the last class, and a sort of confession. Now, obviously, not everybody is able to do that, at that point, and that's when either a family member or somebody with a sidur or a rabbi is called in to say the vidui for them. And the vidui basically says to the effect of, if God forbid I should die now, my death should be a kapara. We believe that death is a form of kapara. Kapara meaning it cleanses us of our misbehavior, which is a beautiful thing. Everybody dies, and that means everybody is somewhat cleansed of their misbehavior, and so our soul is promised an eternal reward. It's for everybody, right? All Yisrael, it says Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelik olam haba. Every single person, every single Jew has a piece of the world to come. It's a guarantee. So you're going to say, well, not everybody behaves, not everybody's a good person. Okay, so there's a process there, and we'll get into more details about that later. But the death itself is already a cleansing process, just that itself, and that's what most of the vidui says. And again, as I know some people are uncomfortable with this idea, but it needs to be said. It needs to be very clear. The vidui is not a curse. So the person who is saying the vidui is not saying, this person should die. That's not what we're saying. The person can live. That's why he says, chas v'shalom, if I die, etc., etc. Saying Shema Yisrael does not curse anybody. Right? Saying Baruch Shem does not curse anybody. Yigdal, Adon Olam, all the other things that are in the vidui are not curses. They're just repetitions. They're reflections on what we believe, our main core beliefs in Judaism, the 13 principles of faith, etc. So, one of which is reward and punishment. So, when somebody says the vidui, somebody says it for the person, it's better to say the vidui and the person should live than to not say the vidui and the person should pass without having a confession. That's what usually happens. People are very reluctant to say this. And then what ends up happening is, the person passes without. Now, obviously, this should not be done in a way that that the person gives up hope in life. In other words, if there's still a chance that they might recover, they're sick and they might recover, you don't do the vidui. But if it's pretty unlikely, then there's nothing wrong with saying the vidui. Now, if the patient, the person dying, feels uncomfortable with the vidui, you can explain what I'm saying now. You can explain to them it's not a curse. It's just a repetition of core beliefs. It's a song of Yigdal, Adon Olam. It's Shema Yisrael. There's nothing inherently definite about your death. Okay. So that's one thing. Now, there are a number of customs that have popped up over time in amongst the Jewish people about what to do when a person is dying, and it's worth repeating some of them. So first of all, we do, while the person is still alive, we do not close their eyes. By closing somebody's eyes while they're still breathing, you're basically saying you're a goner, which we don't want to do. We don't want to make them lose hope, so we don't do that. We don't speed up anybody's death. The medical ethics part of this is not within our purview right now. But when a person is being visited, they should not be left alone. A person, think about it for a moment. You'd want to, when you pass, you'd want to be surrounded by people whom you love, your loved ones. You want to be surrounded by them, and not everybody has that zchut, not everybody has that merit. So many people die alone, and it's unfortunate. There's actually halachot about this. For example, if you're visiting somebody and they're on their deathbed, you're not necessarily allowed to leave. There's a halacha, you're not allowed to leave. In fact, you are at that point patur, you're exempt from any other mitzvah. if they are indeed actually in the process of dying. Now, how do you know if they're dying? So there's a number of ways. There's a whole art to this in the medical community, but basically, you can count breaths. So I'll give you an example. I visited somebody when they were close to death, and the nurse told me that this I visited around say 8:30 p.m. The nurse told me that this person last time they measured the breathing was around 4:30, and was breathing 12 breaths per minute. Now, 12 breaths per minute is not a lot, but it's not. Once it dips below 12 breaths per minute, that's when they say the person has, moments left, maybe hours left, maybe. But 12 breaths per minute is still on the average, on the low side of a living person who's at rest. Okay, laying in bed at rest, breathing like 12 breaths per minute is pretty normal. It's pretty low, but it's normal. It's still healthy. Once they reach the stage where they're breathing less than that, they are now in this category called a goses. A goses, as we said in the last class, is somebody who's pretty certainly on their deathbed, pretty certain to die, and at that point, certain categories, certain halachic issues become relevant. So, for example, we don't move the body at that point at all, even the hand, even the arm. We don't move the body. Why? Because any kind of movement might overexert them, and they might die sooner. We don't want to speed up the process. Once that point happens, also we don't feed the person anymore, because obviously this can cause choking, etc., etc. The life support. This is a very, very touchy issue, but at this point, if life support is keeping them alive, but not really. In other words, they're going to be a vegetable, and a machine will breathe for them, but they are literally brain dead. So that would be a problem halachically of unhooking them from the breathing machine. So it's important to unhook them from the breathing machine before that happens, before they become brain dead. Okay. It's like I said, a tricky issue. This is something that needs to be discussed with probably a posek or a doctor at that time. Again, so it's very important not to shut off any existing supply of oxygen or life-sustaining apparatus, but you have to know when to hook it up, and if it doesn't help, it wouldn't help to hook it up. Don't hook it up is the point. That's I should be very clear about that. So again, once this person is in basically what are called the throes of death, right? Nota lamut, they're pretty much about to die. At that point, the person should not be left alone under any circumstance, right? If they're breathing less than 12 breaths per minute, you need to accompany them. You need to make sure they're accompanied. There's even a custom. There's a mitzvah for a minyan of men to be present. Obviously, that's not really feasible in most hospital situations, but let's say if the person is dying at home, that could be something that is possible, if of course it's possible. Obviously, like I said, people want to be surrounded by their loved ones. Obviously, those people should be in somewhat of a somber mood, but not too depressed, not not speeding along the death. We don't know. We never know, really. I don't know. Medical science is improving in this area, but we don't really know how much a person perceives when they're in that situation. We don't know what they're hearing, what they're actually listening to, how much is actually being perceived. So we have to be careful what we talk about. We don't plan the funeral, as a joke we mentioned last week. We don't do any. We don't argue amongst each other to upset the person. Obviously, you've got siblings there, so siblings often have tiffs, right? So this is not the time for that. If somebody's going to be bursting out crying, and there's already there's other people in the room, that person who cannot hold their emotion, they should probably maybe leave the room for a little bit, compose themselves, and come back. What should these people be doing at the time? Ideally, they should be learning, saying Tehillim, talking about holy things if possible. But again, no preparation for the burial or anything like that should be done at this point. Now, obviously, this is all while the person's still alive. Eventually, everybody passes. So when this person passes, the custom is to wait 20 minutes after the last breath. And that is supposed to sort of say for sure that the person is actually dead. Until those 20 minutes, the person is possibly still alive. So we don't call the Chevra Kadisha yet or anything else. Now, and as soon as those 20 minutes are up, and somebody should time this, it's important. And you shouldn't touch the body at this point. Again, we shouldn't move the body or anything else. There's a custom to put a feather under the nose to see if the person's actually breathing, but I don't think that's really necessary nowadays. There's machines that tell you how much the person's breathing. So once those 20 minutes are up, immediately you should try to close the eyes of the person. Not before the 20 minutes. What would it mean? As we said before, what does it mean when you close the eyes of somebody before the 20 minutes? You're telling them you're going to die, even though they're not quite dead yet. So you wait for the 20 minutes, then you're pretty certain that the person has passed. Then you're supposed to close the eyes if you can. What do I mean by if you can? So I don't know how much experience you have with dead bodies, but the body after death, during death, really tenses up. And so if the person passes with their eyes open, it's not always easy to close the eyes. And if you can't, don't worry about it. That's not the most important thing. What is very important is to then cover the face, cover the head with the sheet. Right? So that is important. And there's also a custom while the person is dying, or if they did not do this yet, they should light a candle in the room and open the window. There's a custom to do that, ancient custom. And this has to do with Kabbalah and what happens with the soul. All right. You're sort of giving the opportunity for it to leave, right? Obviously, just so you know, one of the Jewish beliefs about death is that the soul, until the burial, not just funeral, until the actual burial, until there is earth that fully covers the dead body, until that time, the soul is still clinging to the body. It's above the body. It's not inside the body anymore, but it's clinging. It's sort of like hovering over the body. Okay? Don't want to scare anybody, but that's sort of the image that we're supposed to have. That being the case, there's a certain amount of a certain degree of respect we're supposed to have for the body, which we should have had anyway. This is somebody in theory that you love and care about, but now the body is empty. There's no soul, but the soul is above, and so there is still a sort of an aspect of godliness that is there, and so you need to treat it with a certain kind of respect. One of the things to do, by the way, one of the customs, very I should say difficult custom. We have a custom not to kiss the dead. There's a lot of people I've seen, they get very emotional. They're in the hospital. They fall over the body. They kiss the body. They hug the body. That's not proper Jewish behavior. We try not to kiss the body at that point. I'm sure it's very difficult, especially if, God forbid, it's a child. But it's an important thing to do. It's similar to, but somewhat different. It's similar to the difficulties many people have. There's a halacha also that you're not supposed to kiss people in shul, even your children. It's just not an easy thing to do sometimes. Assuming you love your children, you want to hold them, you want to kiss them, and it's sometimes you have to refrain from showing your full emotion because it's such a holy place. Same thing is happening in this place. On the deathbed is the Shekhinah. On the deathbed is this person's soul, which is attached to Hashem. You can't just treat it like a regular day. You don't just hug and kiss them. Now, as soon as possible, as soon as these 20 minutes are up, once you try to close the eyes, once you covered the head, you should call the Chevra Kadisha right away. The Chevra Kadisha in San Diego, I can't speak for other places. The Chevra Kadisha in San Diego is usually attached to Am Israel Mortuary, and so you should call them as soon as possible. They have 24 hours. They have somebody answering the phone, and they'll come and pick up the body and bring it to the mortuary where the next step is going to happen. It's worth saying that what was I going to say? We're going to get to the Tahara in a few classes. I think next class actually. And during the Tahara, the body is prepared. We're not going to go into details today. That's, like I said, next week. But what you should know for this class, though, is that you can help prepare the body beforehand. How is that? If there are tubes and other things attached to the body, the Chevra Kadisha will not be able to remove them, because once it's an amazing miracle happens to the human body. We have blood, right? And our blood coagulates. And if we're bleeding, the blood is able to dry up and start healing in an ordinary case, right? Today, tomorrow, right? God forbid you get a little cut, your blood will be able to heal back into skin for most people. A dead person does not have that ability. So once a dead person starts bleeding, even the tiniest hole, that blood will continue to pour out until it's all gone. So it's a very difficult thing for the Chevra Kadisha, for the Tahara. So if at all possible, this is one of the halachot I wish more people would know. If at all possible, to take out any needles or anything else before the actual death. Besides, part of the problem. I don't want to get into too gross of details, but I think we have to sometimes. Part of the problem is that every single drop of blood that leaves the dead person has to be buried with them, which can be very complicated. There's as you know, you may or may not know this, but unfortunately, Israel has, Israel has terrorist attacks, etc. And when that happens, there's an entire group of people who scour the area for any drop of blood, and they try to bury it with the remains of the person, right? Of the terror victim. So that's all part of this same idea that each drop of blood is precious, and after the death. Before the death, it's nothing. After the death is when you have to worry about it. You don't have to collect all the blood you've ever had your entire life, every single cut, every single this, every single that. We don't do that, obviously. It's only after death that we're worried about every drop of blood, and that's why it would be a great idea. It would behoove everybody to try to minimize as much as possible how much blood leaves the body after the death. That's all I'm saying. Okay. I hope I'm making that clear. There is a custom, although I've never seen this in action, but maybe that's out of ignorance. I don't know why, I've never seen this in action, but there is a custom. It's brought down in multiple sources. Gesher HaChaim is, by the way, the most famous book of about death in Judaism. It's a sefer of halacha. It's about 100 years old now, and it's Gesher HaChaim, it's called, and it has all the laws, all the customs related to death. And in that book, and amongst other places, it talks about this custom we have of not letting a dead person stay in bed. After the person passes, there's a custom to remove the person from the bed and to place him or her onto the floor. True, that is a custom. Usually this is done by the Chevra Kadisha, men for men, women for women, as we'll get to in the Tahara. But that is something that is a custom. Obviously, there needs to be a death certificate. This is not just halakha. This is American law also. Obviously, you need a death certificate, and to do that, you need to get a doctor to sign off on that, etc. If there's no doctor currently present, you can call the doctor. You don't need to do that immediately. This is not, you don't have to do this in the middle of the night. Obviously, the doctor can be called anytime later. The ideal burial, we're going to talk more about burial in the 2 classes from now, but already you need to know that the ideal burial should happen on the same day as the death. The person should not go overnight without burial, if possible. Not always possible. Sometimes we don't have control over these things sometimes at all, and so it's that's worth knowing. And but if it is at all possible, we try to bury somebody within the same day. If that's the case, that's another good reason to call the Chevra Kadisha, to call Am Israel or whatever mortuary is in your town as soon as possible, right? Because there are a lot of arrangements to be made, and that's your only mitzvah at this point. The person who's mourning, or who will be mourning, is not called a mourner yet. They're in a special category called an onain. That's Hebrew. The word onain means a special level of mourning that's pre-burial. This is aninut, it's called in Hebrew, and we learn about it in Parshat Acharei. So Acharei also, but in Parshat Shmini, after when Nadav and Avihu pass away, so the remaining Kohanim are all aninim. They're all, this is before their burial. So Aaron and his 2 remaining sons are all mourning the deaths of Aaron's son and their brothers. So there's a whole different group of halacha for them, and actually it's mentioned in this week's parsha as well, that they have to treat things differently. One of the things that is true for an onain is that they are patur, they are exempt from all mitzvot, all positive mitzvot. They don't daven, they don't say a bracha, they don't wash their hands, they don't say asher yatzar, they don't they are exempt from all mitzvot. If it's Shabbat, they're exempt from all the positive mitzvot of Shabbat. Positive mitzvot, right? In other words, they don't have to make kiddush, they don't have to make havdalah, they don't have to. Not only do they not have to, they can't. They shouldn't. However, they are not exempt from the negative mitzvot, meaning they still doesn't mean that they can drive or listen to music or whatever it is that they might do during the weekday. For sure, they should not do listening to music. For sure not. That's not within our concept of mourning. Obviously, it's very easy to say this now in this sort of parv environment where we're not dealing with death. Baruch Hashem, we're all Baruch Hashem healthy. Admev Esrim Shana, but so it's very easy to say this now, but in the moment, it might be difficult to control your emotion enough to have the mental fortitude, really, to get over your grief enough to take care of the mitzvot you need to take care of. You need to deal with the burial. You need to make the phone calls you need to make. You need to if you have somebody who, not advertises is the wrong word, but publicizes funerals, and you need a minion, so you need to get the word out. So as sad as you are, you need to put down your tissues for a moment and take care of business. It's because, remember, I should have said this before, when it comes to death, we have to deal with a very, very large series of events. Okay, what do I mean by that? I mean, think of the funeral for a moment, right? And I think I say this at almost every funeral. The funeral is for the dead person, to honor them, but the funeral is also for the mourners, right? That they need to have an avenue to sort of release, to have some sort of psychological comfort from the event that just occurred. But a funeral is also for the people who have gathered there. They have a mitzvah to do, and the funeral is the best way to be able to do that. So the funeral is, for instance, supposed to allow the people who are there to wish their condolences, to perform the actual burial, which is the real mitzvah of the day, and it's also a time to reflect. Any death, any event that happens in your life should be an opportunity to reflect upon your own life and think about, what am I doing? Where am I going? You hear all these eulogies about such a person, such a fine person. They're so nice. They're so kind. They do this and they do that. And you're supposed to think to yourself, well, what about me? Do I do these things? How am I going to be remembered? What are people going to say in the speeches for me? Is there going to be a minion for me? Right? These are the kinds of things that the people should reflect on when these sorts of things happen. There's a number of stories. Oh boy, a number of stories about great rabbis who were like on the road to somewhere, and they passed away, in some other town. And then there's a whole fight about where to bury him, because the town where he passed away wants him to be buried there, because his burial is going to be in a merit for them. But the town he's from wants him back. Well, they want the merit. They want to be able to visit his grave and pray there. He's in theory a holy person. So there's a lot of stories like that. Why do I bring this up? Because this is part of being left after somebody passes. This is all part of some of the different things to think about. How do we honor this person? How do we give this person respect? How do we reflect on this person and do something for ourselves? How do we give comfort or gain comfort? All of these things are all part of all of the processes that we're discussing right now. So again, the burial has to happen. So you get over, at least for the moment, get over your own sadness, shake it off, at least for the moment. Call the mortuary, call whoever publicizes these things, spread the word, and then go back to your mourning. But you need to have some presence of mind for that. There's a custom. Obviously, I think we've mentioned all the way back in happier times when we were learning about bar bat mitzvah, maybe brit milah even. We learned about the idea that we don't invite people to certain kinds of events. We don't invite people to mitzvot. One of the reasons is because they might say no, and so they're giving up a mitzvah. We don't want to put, as it mentions in last week's parsha, we don't want to put lifnei iver lo titein michshal. We don't want to put a stumbling block before the blind. And by giving them the opportunity to say no to a mitzvah, that's we're handing them a grenade. Saying no to a mitzvah. Do you know what a mitzvah is? You know how much reward there is for a mitzvah like this? You're handing them a grenade. You're pulling the pin. You can't do such a thing. We don't invite people to mitzvot for that reason, and especially when it comes to funerals, we certainly don't formally invite them. So we announce it. We don't invite them. We don't say please come. We announce it and we ask if they will come. Maybe if we need to prepare for a certain number of people, as with weddings and as with Brit Milah, etc. You have to tell the caterer or whatever. But when it comes to funerals, we don't invite for sure. But we do mention that we say that there's where it is, when it is, etc. But we also, when it comes to telling relatives, and of course, assuming that people have multiple relatives, there will be a few relatives who are in the room, right? Who already know. There are a few relatives, close or far, it doesn't matter, who didn't even know the person was sick. So how do you bring this up? So obviously, common sense and dignity calls for you to be sensitive, and don't just don't just blurt it out. Say it gently. Try to be sort of as roundabout as possible about it, if you can, and let them figure it out on their own. One way that I've heard people say it, by the way, a wording that's worth remembering, is they call up the person. They say, Uncle Sheldon. Okay, making up a name here. Uncle Sheldon. I don't know if you know, but he was sick for a very long time. Yeah. Okay. No, I didn't know. Okay. Well, he was sick for a very long time, and he unfortunately he's not sick anymore. Right? So unfortunately he's not sick. Isn't that great? He's not sick. Wait, why are you saying? I see. I see. Like you do it like that, then the person can figure out on their own that the person passed, and that is part of the best way to tell people about a passing. The okay, next very, very important thing that many people don't seem to know about. It's an almost neglected mitzvah. I see from my list of visitors here today that we have the zchut, we have the merit to be in the company of somebody who's very, very, very serious about this mitzvah, who's helped probably hundreds of people with this mitzvah, and that's Doris Jaffe. And that's the mitzvah of Shmeera. Shmeera means to guard. And when a person passes away, they should, besides not being alone when they pass, they should not be left alone until the burial. They're supposed to be accompanied the entire time. And if the funeral is right away, Baruch Hashem, great, wonderful. It's not so difficult to give them this very important kavod. But very often, probably most often, the person isn't buried right away. For whatever reason, they're waiting for a relative to come. The doctor wasn't around for the death certificate. The funeral parlor isn't available. The cemetery doesn't have a spot. There are so many factors. It's not anybody's fault if somebody's not buried immediately, but there is something you must do in that situation, and that's you need to tell the Chevra Kadisha, you need to tell Am Israel or whatever mortuary you're dealing with that you want Shmeera. You want somebody to be there with the person. And I know, if I may, I'm gonna guess by the look on your face, I will. Some people give Shmeera through Shabbos. Their Shabbos is spent in a mortuary, watching over a dead body. Their Yom Tov, 3-day Yom Tov, could be spent watching over a dead body. And that's a mitzvah. Now, it doesn't have to be somebody from the Chevra Kadisha. It can be a relative. I was, Baruch Hashem, I was zoche to give Shmeera to my father when he passed. In fact, we'll get into the laws of Shmeera in a moment, But I spent the entire night really, besides saying Tehillim, I learned the entire Art Scroll Mourning and Halacha book, this thick book, at least the parts that are relevant for the beginning of the mourning process. Obviously, I didn't need to learn about yard sites, etc. yet, but I went through that entire book for the first time in my life. I've seen the book before, but I had no connection to death. I'd never led a funeral before. I never, obviously, I never had a close relative pass that I had to take care of or anything. So this was my first experience with death. This was 16 years ago already, and immediately I was thrust into it, and that's what I did during the Shmira. As we'll see, there's other things to do. But anyway, the number one and most important thing about the Shmira is the body should not be left alone. A lot of people don't know this. And so very often, as the Chevra Kadisha, we will take care of the body, but we in the end we have to leave it alone. We leave it with a candle. There's a custom to leave a candle with the body, but there's basically two reasons for the Shmira. I'll give you a practical one, and then we'll give you a more Kabbalistic one. Okay, practical reason for Shmira is because, and this is going to be a little gross, but there's critters in the world. There's bugs, roaches and rats and whatever else, and we don't want that. Obviously, that's not respectful for that for those kinds of things to be climbing on our bodies, right? So part of the Shmira is sort of to scare away these things. Similarly, Shmira is a spiritual thing. Remember, we said before that the soul of the person is hovering over the body. This is a very holy thing. We don't just leave it alone. We don't just let it be. We accompany it. So we give it kavod. We sit with it. The custom is for the person sitting Shmira is not supposed to sleep the entire night. The entire night, and until the burial. Somebody is awake with the body the whole time, and what they usually do is they say Tehillim. The custom is to say Kuf Yud Tet 119, which, like we said before, has all the letters of the Aleph-Bet, and we spell out the person's name just as we did. We didn't really talk about that, but we'll get to that later. There's other times when we do the same thing. When we pray for somebody who's sick, we mention the person's name and their mother's name. The Ashkenazi custom is at this point the person is not dead anymore. The person is dead now. It does not need a refuah shlema anymore. Obviously, at this point the custom is to switch and to use the father's name. Right? Use the person's father's name. The Sephardic custom is to always use the mother's name no matter what, and so that's those are different customs. From what I understand, some people who sit Shmira say both the mother's name and the father's name. All right. Either way, that's the custom. Another good reason, by the way, if I may be so bold, another good reason to this is going to sound mean, but again, and we've said this before, this is all the way back to the beginning of our Jewish life cycle. This is a review of the Jewish life cycles class, back to what we were talking about, baby names. This is another good reason to be careful about what name you give your child, right? Because this name is the Jewish name is the name that they're going to be with at Shmira, right? So the person sitting Shmira has to know this name, and if it's some weird name and with some strange spelling, we don't know how to spell it. It's 3 names for the father, 3 names for the mother. It gets complicated. Don't supercalifragilistics. Don't give any strange names to your child. Keep it simple. Another good reason for that. This is again based on one of the reasons why Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky always recommended people give only 1 name instead of 2. Again, that's a custom. Not going to get into that. We talked about that in another class. All right. So back to Shmira. The Shmira is not usually said, the person who's watching the body isn't literally in the same room as the body usually, and they shouldn't be. They can obviously go out of the room every once in a while as well, and they should, and that's where they can learn, or that's where they can daven. Why don't you want to learn or daven in front of the body? So this is the same reason why men have to tuck in their tzitzit when they go to a funeral, or when they do Shmira, or when they do a tahara. They have to tuck in their tzitzit, because you don't want the dead to quote unquote see mitzvot and be embarrassed that they can't do mitzvot. Again, that same idea. Mitzvot do not happen after death. You've done yours. That's it. But we don't want to embarrass them and make them feel bad that they can't do any more mitzvot. So we so that's one of the reasons why we don't learn in front of them, we don't eat in front of them, etc. So obviously a person who's sitting Shmira will need to eat, especially let's say it's a 3-day Yom Tov. They have to eat. So they would do it in a different room, right? Not in the same room as the Niftar is at the time. Interestingly enough, just as we mentioned about the person who is left alone with the dying person is patur from all mitzvot, including Shabbat, including Yom Tov, all positive mitzvot, just like an onein. So too, the person who sits Shmira also doesn't have to make Kiddush, and also doesn't have to have Lechem Mishnah and 3 Sudas and Shabbos and everything else. It doesn't have to make Havdalah. Patur from all mitzvot during Shmira. That's how important this mitzvah is. Okay. So who is a mourner? This is the next topic. We've been talking about all these things that they have to do. Lighting candles and all that stuff. Oh, I forgot. There's a custom I've never, again, here's another example of a custom I've never seen actually performed, but there is a custom to pour out water from the house of the person who passed away. To take like a bowl or a pitcher of water and to like spill it out when the person passes, assuming they pass in the house. I don't know the entire reason for this. I don't know where this came from. I don't know. Obviously, there's water, there's cleansing and purifying and all that other stuff. Maybe it's because the water is being wasted, and we're saying, the things of this world have no purpose anymore for this person who passed away. Maybe. There are all kinds of reasons given for this custom. It is, like I said, a custom I've never seen or performed, and if I'm not mistaken, my wife will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's a Bukharian custom to pour out water from a house of somebody who's leaving the house, alive, not dying. Somebody's going on a trip or whatever, so there's a custom to pour out water towards the person. I don't know where these customs come from. Thank you. Doris sent a text message here. The custom is to run all of the faucets in the house. Okay. I guess it's probably similar to that same idea, to like let the water go. I don't know. I don't know how ancient of a custom that is, because keep in mind, indoor plumbing is, relatively new, right? So, right, medieval Europe didn't have indoor plumbing until like 200, 300 years ago. So I don't know what they did before that. If you poured out all your water, you literally didn't have any water left, right? So it's not the same as turning on your faucets. I don't know, but anyway. So yes, you let your faucets run for a little while. Yeah, I've seen that in print, but again, I've never seen that in action. But that's I haven't seen everything. Come on. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not true. So now let's talk about who is mourning. Who is the mourner? So this can get tricky, but all of these, obviously, God forbid, we shouldn't know of such things. But a father is a mourner. Somebody who loses a father is a mourner. Somebody who loses a mother is a mourner. Somebody who loses a brother or half brother is a mourner. A sister or half sister, God forbid, a son or a daughter, or a wife or husband. That's it. Those 6 categories are it. Okay? Again, parents, half siblings, children, and spouses. That's it. Okay? Anybody else, cousins, best friend, they're not officially mourners. So amongst other things, they wouldn't pass through the shurot at a funeral. They're the ones who are making the shurot. They're making the lines that the mourner passes through. Only these people are mourners. Now, what if you didn't have, if God forbid, believe it or not, it happens. What if you did not have a good relationship with a person who passed away, but you're one of these categories? You're half brother, you're half sister, you had or any of these other parents, siblings, spouse. You didn't have a good relationship with them. It was a tough relationship. It was not shalom bayit in the house. Okay, let's say, God forbid, does that excuse you from mourning? And the answer is, for better or for worse, no. You still have the complete obligation to mourn. You still have to mourn 100%, and all of the laws of Avelut that we're going to talk about in the coming classes, all of them kick in. Now, very sensitive topic is, God forbid, a baby who dies. Say SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, or something else, illness, premature birth, whatever. The laws of Avelut are only kept by the relatives if the baby died after 30 days. In other words, anybody who lives less than 30 days, and we sort of talked about this when we talked about Pidyon Haben, why we wait 30 days to do a Pidyon Haben, it's because the child is not considered viable, is not considered living unless they've lived for 30 days. A tricky part of this question is, let's say, a premature baby who was alive for 30 days, but not really alive. In other words, was an incubator and was sort of artificially kept alive for 30 days. That's a very, very tricky halachic issue, and a shaila should be asked if, God forbid, that should be a practical question. We shouldn't know of such things. You shouldn't know of any of these things, but as long as we're learning, we should at least know what the obligations are for us. Stepchildren, step parents, adoption, fiance, all of those categories, as much as you might care about them and love them in life, they are not considered mourners in halacha. Okay, you don't have to wait. You don't have to not 30 days, not the year. There's no mourning obligated on a person in that situation. Can you mourn the person? Always. If you lost a good friend, you're going to be sad. That's okay. You can mourn the person. You don't sit shiva, you don't tear kriya, but as we're gonna learn about these things. But you still can be sad. You can talk about the person, try to have fond memories of them. That's perfectly within your rights, and probably you should do that. You should not be a robot. You should have emotion when it comes to the people close to you. Another touchy situation, but since we're on this touchy subject anyway, might as well bring it up. A convert A convert to Judaism is no longer, according to the Torah, is no longer related to his or her relatives, non-Jewish relatives. What that means is, for example, they don't necessarily inherit from them. And according to Torah law, the rabbi said otherwise. According to Torah law, this is so true that they can even marry their relative after they've converted, assuming that their relative converts to Judaism too. They're now not relatives anymore, and they can actually marry. According to Torah law, yes. The rabbi said no, they can't. So don't plan a chasna. But anyway, that's and I know, yeah, it sounds gross, but that's probably why the rabbi said no. But either way, what happens when a relative of a biological relative of a ger passes away? What should the ger do? So really, they don't have to do anything for their non-Jewish relatives. They're under no obligation halachically. Obviously, if they want to keep peace within the quote-unquote family, right? They still have cousins, brothers, etc., biologically that they're close to, and they want to not alienate themselves from them. In theory, if they don't want to alienate themselves, then then they should definitely attend the funeral. They should definitely attend the possibly the wake if it's not a religious ceremony, or any of the other things that their non-Jewish relatives might do. Obviously, though, a ger whose wife or children, God forbid, pass away after she becomes a ger, obviously is mourning, because a ger is Jewish 100%. So they have all the same laws as we do, and all of this kicks in, obviously. Some other laws of aninut, as we talked about, this weird stage before actual burial. The onen is not supposed to eat meat, not supposed to drink wine, except on Shabbat, but they don't have to because they're exempt from positive mitzvot. They're not supposed to wash their hands or their face with warm water. They're not supposed to take a bath or a shower. Definitely not for cleanliness purpose. Definitely not for comfort purposes. If they have some schmutz, some dirt on their hands or on their face, obviously they can wash it off. They shouldn't use perfumes or creams for pleasure. Obviously, if they're using a cream for health reasons or whatever, that's different. They're not supposed to get a haircut or shave, cut their nails. They're not supposed to greet people. They're not supposed to go to business or go to work. They're not supposed to launder their clothes or even wear fresh clothes. They're not supposed to have marital relations or even go out for a walk or go out into the street for any other reason besides to arrange the funeral. Part of the reason for all of these laws of aninut is to focus the onen's mind to the present mitzvah at hand, which is the burial. They have to get the burial done, right? Don't get distracted with other things, with meals and wheels and everything else. The only thing you should be thinking about is burying your loved one. And once that happens, then a whole different level of avelut, of mourning, kicks in. By the way, this is it's worth mentioning now. If in the unfortunate circumstance that the mourner is a child under bar or bat mitzvah, they are 100% exempt from all of this. They don't have to say Kaddish. Often you see, unfortunately, there's a terror victim, and just to get people's emotions riled up, they record the child saying Kaddish at the funeral. That's if the child is not bar or bat mitzvah, they're not supposed to be saying Kaddish. There's no such thing. They're not supposed to say Kaddish. They're not supposed to. They don't have to tear kriya. They don't have to have any of the mourning, not sit shiva or anything like that. They are not an onen. They're not an avel, and we'll get more into that in a few classes from now. In the next class, I'm going to try to do this as tastefully as possible. I'm going to walk you through a tahara, the cleaning of the body in preparation for burial that is done by the Chevra Kadisha. And we'll get to that, God willing, next week. If there are any questions, I'm going to stop the live stream to Facebook, and you're welcome to ask any questions you have.